Good afternoon, everyone. This is Pastor Devin Miller, the real pastor, the true pastor, bringing you another edition of Financial Matters. Why? Because financials matter. This is an extension of Clear Faith Christian Counseling, Consulting, and Coaching Services, and also a part of the ministry of Clear Faith Christian Ministries. So we're glad that you're here on YouTube. Hopefully, you'll come in, chime in, and learn something on today. Our guest will be Carlos McConico Jr., who is going to talk to us about the importance of trust, having a trust, setting up a trust, the benefits of a trust. We talked on last week. This is a part of a four-part series. So last week we had the introduction, and today we're going to kind of get into why a trust and more of the particulars and the process. A little bit on the process of establishing a establishing a trust for yourself and for your family. So we're awaiting Carlos to come in. He just sent me a text, and as soon as he gets the link, he'll be joining us. Um, One of the reasons why it was important for me to do this, I did it for a person last month. Um, and I get a lot of people that come to me and, want to talk about, finances for the church, finances for myself, and how am I managing them and all of that. And one of the things that I've learned is that I'm a connector. I try to bring people together, and so, my finances, I have a financial advisor. I don't have a lot of money, so their job is easy. But, I have set aside some money, and it's being worked within the markets and things like that. And so I understand personally the importance of it uh, for retirement, to leave something for my kids, and all of that. But in these trying times and in these very hard economic times, sometimes our financial future is not on our mind because of our financial present. We still have a person in office who don't care about the middle class. We have someone who is not looking out for us. And so part of what I feel I've been called to do is to bring the good information that is needed to the everyday person. And so that's why we do these series with different people from the financial sector. The next one we'll probably do is someone from the insurance sector to really talk about the importance of insurance, because you and I know is paying someone something for something that we're not going to use till later is not always on our radar. Uh, think about it with car insurance. You got to have car insurance. You got to pay it every month, but the likelihood of you having an accident is very is very slim if you're a good driver. So, um, you know, but it's important that we talk about it. It's important that we look at it, because if we don't, then we're not prepared. And so these series that we do is just really a preparing for the future in the present, and to do it early enough so that it's not taxing in these tough economic times. Okay. So with that, I'm going to bring on Carlos, and we're going to have our discussion for today. Carlos, how you doing, sir?
Oh, doing great, doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing as best as I can and what I got. So we're going to go ahead, and I see you got your slides already set up. So before we get into the full presentation, um, give me, because we're going to talk about really kind of the nuts and bolts of what is a trust, all that kind of stuff, kind of deeper than what you did on last week. But for those who might be watching new, Why is it important for us to have this discussion from your perspective as a person that does this? Talks with people, talking about their future. One of the things I said, I don't know if you heard it, but sometimes it's hard for us to talk about the future when the present is crazy. And our money is, as they say, our money is funny and our change is strange. But
That's,
why is it really important, even in these tough economic times? Why is it important to have this type of conversation?
wow, that's such a loaded question. The reason it's so important is because the decisions that we made yesterday affect us today, and the decisions that we make today will affect us tomorrow. So
Right,
even though things may be bleak as of now,
right.
imagine what happens if we continue to, in that same line or same process, continue to make decisions that are going to affect our future, but we make poor decisions or no decision at all. I've been taught as a child, not to decide is to decide.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So to make a choice is a choice,
Yes, sir.
or
Yes, sir.
or to not make a
Not
choice
make a
is a
choice.
choice.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. All
That's right.
right, all right. Well, let's go ahead. I'm gonna pull your slides up, and let's go ahead and get into today's discussion.
Well, yes, sir. And before I get too far into that, I do want to clarify a few things that I want to make sure that we all are understanding. The first thing is when my wife saw this presentation, she reminded me that she did get to meet my grandfather. So when I originally spoke, I said that she didn't get to meet my grandfather, but she helped me clarify the details in that
Right.
she met my grandfather, but she did not get to meet him as my wife, and he was not able to attend our wedding because he was sick. So what ends up happening is he attended the college graduation that was in May. My wife and I got married in July, 2 months later, and he was too sick to travel. So by
Gotcha.
the time we were able to travel back home, that's when he had already passed away, and it was for that Christmas. So she reminded me so ever so politely that I misspoke on that one. So I wanted to get that cleared up.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
Yes, sir. And then the other thing I want to clear up is I wanted to give a formal definition of probate. That was a question that you asked, and I gave you an understanding or an example, but I don't think I ever read an actual definition for you. So I'd like to do that before we get
Hmm.
started, just to talk about what is probate. That's the
Right.
question that was asked. What is probate? Well, probate, and this is according to the almighty Google, right? So you don't have to look very
Right.
hard to find it. But probate is a legal process that occurs after a person dies, involving the validation of a will, if there is one present, and the subsequent administration and distribution of the deceased assets. So it essentially ensures the deceased wishes as expressed in a will are honored and that their estate is managed and distributed according to the law. So it is the legal process of distributing and executing the estate plan that was set forth. And as we learned last week, we talked about intestacy, meaning you didn't have any plan at all, but then, of course, having a will at least give you a plan, but you still have to go through that probate process. And after we talked about that, we talked about a few other options. We talked about the beneficiary designations as well as joint ownership and the cautions against those as well, or things that you need to be aware of in making those decisions. And then we finally talked about a trust, which is also a legal instrument. Okay. And so when we talk about what is a trust, I'm going to, in fact, let me give you that definition. And I apologize.
No worries.
So a trust is the legal arrangement where one party, which is the grantor or the settlor, transfers assets to a trustee to manage on behalf of a beneficiary. So that's what it is. It is a legal arrangement. And we asked or proposed a question. I kind of set you guys up with a trick question. Does every person need a trust? And we
Hmm.
said, well, yes, every person does need a trust, right? But I
Hmm.
also expressed to you people who do not need a trust. And we're not going to be talking to those people today because they decided last week they didn't want to continue. But for those of us that wanted to continue, just want to remind you of who should consider a trust as a part of their estate plan. These are
Mhm.
those who desire to leave an inheritance to their children's children. Of course, that is a biblical principle that is found in Proverbs, leaving an inheritance to your children's children. Those who want to build true generational wealth in their lifetime. Number three, those who want to reduce their taxes and keep the wealth in the family. Number four, those who want to be remembered in their family for generations for what they did do, not for what they didn't do. Uh, we want to also consider the individuals who want to set a standard of success for the family, protect their family from the government and even themselves. We discussed that some family members need protection from themselves. You can't just endow them with a certain amount of wealth. Make sure that everyone in your family has benefits. Make sure everyone is taken care of from a financial perspective, and of course, ultimately to be an obedient servant to what God has given you. So, does anyone already have a trust? Is a question that we like to ask just to find out. For those that may be participating, of course, I may or may not be able to answer or see your response. But if you already have a trust, then what we want to talk about is the different types of trust. Okay. Today, we're going to talk about the four trusts of financial freedom. And as you can see on the screen here, you may want to take some notes. If you have pen and paper, you're going to need four types of trust. First, you want to have a business trust. That is for all your business affairs, business assets to go into. Then you want a family trust. You need an investment trust. Okay, so I think we talked a little bit about your father and what he taught you about investing and watching the market. You even talked about your experience with some of the cryptocurrencies that may be available. Investment trust allows you to make all those same moves, but inside of a trust for the protection that it provides. And then ultimately, you need that of a private foundation trust. Now, we won't get into all of the details of the private foundation trust today because that's going to be more on a tax conversation. So you'll definitely want to tune in to next week, and then we will be able to go further into how that tax advantage is going to become part of your estate. Okay, now each one of these trusts take in money in different forms. Okay, so your business trust is going to take in income. Business trust takes in income. Your family trust will take in principal. Now, what does principal mean? Principal means money that has already been taxed. So there's no tax deduction or tax liability on those funds. Okay, so that's going to be your family trust that takes in principal. Then the investment trust takes in capital gains. And then the private foundation takes donations. Okay, private foundation takes in donations. Now, again, the whole point of having these four trusts is so that you can operate in each one of those spaces, whether you're taking in money from income or capital gains, or you say, you know what, this money's already been taxed because we've made some donations. You can take donations in your private foundation, and then, of course, the principal that comes into your family trust. Okay, so let's go into it. So these trusts that we're talking about now are not living trusts. These are not the trusts that you would get from your local state jurisdiction or state attorneys. These are private federal trusts. Private federal trusts. And so we're going to go into the details of what that means and how these trusts were developed today. Okay? So, private federal trusts are based on private contracts which are linked to Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. Okay? This shows that nothing can come in the way of you and a private contract, which is what is created when you have a private law trust. Now, this trust supersedes statutory law and is directly filed at the federal jurisdiction. This is allowing you advanced rulings based on Supreme Court cases. What does all that mean? Well, simply put, your private laws or common laws are federal laws. and these laws supersede that of your particular state, wherever you may be. I'm in the state of Texas. So if I have a private law trust or private federal trust, which is based on those private laws, that's going to supersede any state laws. Well, when we talked about the process of probate, that is handled at a state level because some states may have income tax, other states may not. For an example, that is dependent upon the state in which you live. In fact, there are 41 states that do require income tax, for example. Okay, so here in the state of Texas, we do not have to pay an income tax. So that would make a huge difference depending on where you're located in the United States. But when you have a private federal trust that's under common law, that supersedes state law. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. There are important factors that influence your trust and that are separate from that of a living trust. Here are those four factors, and we're going to talk a little bit about them today. As we spoke about jurisdiction, because it's at a federal level, we're going to talk about the level of privacy you have now that's available because it's a federal jurisdiction. Then we talk about protection. And then ultimately, as I said before, taxes we're probably going to save for next week. Okay, so you got to hang around. You got to hang around. So when it
Right.
comes to the jurisdiction, as was stated before, it's going to be under federal law. How is that possible? Well, the way that these trusts are established, they are established at a local post office, which then gives you federal jurisdiction. When you have an address at a post office, now that becomes a federal address. And for those of us that have any questions regarding the validity of what I'm saying, go ahead and commit a crime at the local post offices if you don't get federal time. All right. So, what gives you that jurisdiction is by setting up your trust with an address at the local post office. Once you have federal jurisdiction, that means the only time that you can even go to court for anything concerning your trust is going to be handled at the District of Columbia or Supreme Court. Okay, and I'm going to give you some more information on that here in just a moment. Let's see here. Where is that at? There we go. Okay, so the next thing is the privacy, which again at a federal level gives you more privacy than you would have at a state level. Why is that? Remember, we talked about probate. During the probation process, okay, when all of the assets are being evaluated at that state level, attorneys are allowed to investigate and pierce through those trust instruments because they are tied to your social security number. So, depending on the case, not every case is going to have that happen. Okay, I do want to make that clear. But depending on the case, an attorney does have the ability to subpoena or require those documentation regarding how your trusts are set up. And in that event, that means now that you have the ability to investigate all of the assets that are included in that trust. Okay. But with the federal, okay, the federal private trust, one of the things that allows you to have that privacy is the trusts are not set up in your social security number. They're going to have their own separate EIN number. So one of the things that was said a moment ago was that when it comes to the definition of a trust, that there is a grantor or settler. Okay, with the private federal trust, we use a non-grantor as the settler.
Mhm.
That means someone else would be willing to help you establish that trust so it won't be in your social security number, but you will come in as a trustee. And we're going to talk about trust positions here on a future slide. Okay. So understand now the jurisdiction is going to be handled at a federal level that gives you an ultimate level in privacy. And then the protection that we're talking about is from lawsuits, as stated before. In the event that someone does decide to sue or come up against your trust once it's established, well, they would have to first be able to put up $150,000 bond to even be tried in the court cases. For example, the U.S. District Court is a refund court. All court fees and attorney fees must be paid in full for any cases to be heard.
Wow.
There have not been any cases brought up against this type of trust that we can record as far as back as 2022. Okay, so with these type of trusts, there are no cases that have been filed against them,
Hmm.
because in order to be able to file that case and be able to heard in front of the U.S. Supreme Court or District Court, you would have to have all court fees paid, and that $150,000 bond has to be paid. That protects you from lawsuits. Most lawyers are not licensed in DC. So the second level is you would have to have an attorney that's licensed in DC. So let's say that someone was determined to come against your trust and they had the resources to do so. They would, in addition, need an attorney that is licensed in DC that would be able to come up against this trust. Okay. And then, of course, if that ever happens, the attorney that we have as part of our legal team, as I mentioned before, I'm not the attorney. I'm not giving any financial advice or legal advice. I'm just a consultant here. But our attorney, Ariel Comer, is licensed in both Texas real estate and licensed in the District of Columbia. And we got one of the baddest attorneys in the land that will be there as on retainer now, so that it would be at no cost to you if anybody ever came against your trust. She would represent you.
So right here, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Give me a worst case scenario whereby this would play out, where you would why would someone want to come against your trust? Would it be a
Okay.
family member, or would it be, say a business partner or something like that?
That is a great question. Excellent question. In fact, I'm glad you asked. So let's say, for example, okay, and I'm just going to use a scenario that most of us can relate to. Let's say it's the 4th of July, okay, and we decided we're going to have a barbecue. And look, for the sake of this conversation, it's going to be at your house, Pastor Miller. Look, we're going to do it at your house, okay?
Right.
And someone who you know very well, my wife and I, and some of our friends. But let's say one of us stubs our toe on the corner of the patio.
Hmm.
And we decide, I know we've been friends for a long time. I know you guys love us. We love you. But now we're talking about a opportunity to get money. And
Hmm.
so the people that are closest to you may be the very ones that say, hey, that concrete should have been this tall instead of this tall, or should have been located in a different place, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so for whatever reason, we decide that we want to come up against you,
Hmm.
okay? But because it happened at your house. But in this case, you don't own the asset.
Hmm.
I am not able to sue your trust
Right.
because the trust is the one that owns the asset, and I don't know who owns the trust because your social is not attached.
Right.
So I may sue you, Devin Miller, and because on paper you don't own anything,
Right.
you
Right.
don't have any assets. Well, hopefully you got an umbrella policy for that person that seems to be concerned, or in some cases, you may not have the resources to pay that claim, but all of your assets are protected
Got it.
because they are no longer in your name or in your social security number. That's just the best example I can come up with on the spot. I appreciate
Right. Right. Right.
it, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's something we all can relate to, the family barbecue, right?
Right.
And anything can happen. Uh, especially if somebody gets really hurt or loses their life or anything of that nature. They want to hold
Sure.
somebody responsible. They want to hold
Right.
somebody responsible. But
Okay.
that's a great question. Great question. So,
Okay.
any others?
No, no, that was the one that hit me.
Okay, yes, sir. All right. So then here's another thing that you need to know as far as the jurisdiction, the privacy, the protection are concerned. The U.S. tax court is where most cases are going to be heard. And there are about 215 cases on the record. 169 of those cases involved in estates and trusts. Now, why do you think that is? Because that's where most assets are going to transfer, and the government sees that opportunity to collect on taxes owed or due.
Hmm.
Meaning, if you did not take care of responsibilities for whatever reason, we're not here to judge anyone's situation, But let's say you had a tax liability that was outstanding and you weren't able to take care of it, or maybe you owed someone for an asset that was purchased on loan, okay, or for whatever reason you had any other type of liens or judgments against you. If you didn't take care of it while you were yet alive, there's no one that's going to come out unscathed. You're not going to be able to pass those assets along without paying what's due. And so at
Right.
the time of probate, that's where all those people can come out and say, hey, you owe me for this, you owe me for that, in whatever form or fashion that may be. Well, of the 215 cases that are on record, 169 involve estates and trusts. Because if you didn't pay during your lifetime, they definitely want to collect at your passing.
Right.
Now, of those 169 cases, all of them involved a grantor trust. Remember what we spoke about a minute ago about being a non-grantor trust, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. I'm going to show you those things. A grantor trust means you are the one that put your social security up to establish the trust, and you're contributing your assets to the trust. And because you put your social security number associated with that trust, that at any time during the probate process or in lawsuit or litigation, an attorney can pierce through that and say, well, you're the one associated with it, and then now your assets are exposed.
Mm-hmm.
But with a non-grantor trust, your social is no longer attached. We have a non-grantor settler, and that keeps you completely private, completely private. No social security number attached. It is not filed with the state, so it's not going to be on your state record. These are private contracts, and your trustee of the trust has full discretion. So you truly own nothing, but you have access or control everything,
Right.
right? Own nothing, control everything. And what we say here is access is better than ownership. All right. Now, just a couple of tidbits for next week. There's no double taxation, no capital gains tax. There are pre-tax benefits, and you have legally recognized in the IRS code tax deferral. Okay, so we're going
Mhm.
to talk about that next time. Again, I just kind of want to whet your appetite about the taxes. That becomes a big thing. Obviously, if you're able to create any income for your family, you want to avoid as many taxes as possible legally. Legally,
Right.
okay.
Right. Right.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about trust development now. We want to explain a little bit more how these trusts came about, or the features of the trust that we're speaking of. Okay. And just as a reference point, I should make note that most of the countries in this world are established as trusts. Okay. As trust. And so with trust, especially that of the private foundation we talked about, the other name for that, and you can look this up, is a 508C, according to the IRS code, 508C, a ministry trust. Okay. And so most countries are established as a nonprofit ministry trust. Therefore, those countries that have prime ministers, that's where it comes
Mm.
from. Okay. So we may have heard these terms before, but may not always know where they come from. That's
Right.
why most countries are going to be set up as a private trust. Okay. Now, the developments that matter to you and I are on this page right here. There are three individuals that had major contribution to the clauses and the types of trust that we use. So Joseph Kennedy being one, Mitt Romney being two, and our commander in chief currently, Donald Trump, is number three that had a instrumental part in the trust and the clauses that are set up. So what did Joseph Kennedy set up? Joseph Kennedy created what's called a dynasty trust. And this is in 1936. And the reason he constructed this is because he wants to avoid any estate taxes or generation skipping tax. What does that mean? Well, some individuals understand when you pass on your estate to loved ones, there could be an estate tax. Again, that's throughout that probate process. So, what was set up was a way to set assets to go into your grandchildren's name to do what's called a skipping of a generation. Well,
Mm,
of course, the government found out about that too, and they created what's called a generation skipping tax, meaning you're not going to skip over us. It doesn't matter if you go directly to your direct offspring as children, or even if you try to skip a generation, there's still going to be what's called a generation skipping tax. Well, what the dynasty trust allows you to do is to pass things on for generations and not have to pay those taxes. Once
mm,
again, having it in an EIN number, it's an individual that hasn't died.
right.
So you're able to pass things on. That's what creates that dynasty within a trust. Dynasty meaning you can pass on for three, four generations, and so on. The second person that had a major impact on the types of trust and the development here is Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney created what's called the non-grantor, which we've just used that term recently, non-grantor spendthrift trust. And this is in 1976. And the reason for this clause is to avoid any taxes passed to beneficiaries for the use of its asset. Why is that
Mm,
important? Well, what happens is Mitt Romney had a child that was disabled or had a disability. And what the claim is, if a child is disabled and they become an adult, they do not have the ability to pay taxes. If they're not able to work, they're not able to take care of themselves, then they shouldn't be required to pay taxes. So,
right.
with that understanding, this in 1976 became part of the law and it be put into effect where you have what's called a non-grantor spendthrift, which allows you to take care of a beneficiary and they not be liable for the taxes.
Mm,
Okay. Now, once again, that spendthrift is something we're probably going to spend a little bit more time on tomorrow, next week. Excuse me, not tomorrow, next week, because that's all involved with the tax benefits. But just
mm,
understand what a spendthrift clause allows you to do is to take care of your daily living expenses, livelihood, and it's all tax deductible.
mm.
All tax deductible. We're talking everything from housing, education, vehicle maintenance, even your travel. Okay, so please stay tuned. Again, next week is really going to be an exciting week for some of us. Okay, so that's what was taking place. Again, this is in 1976. And then here, Donald Trump, regardless of how you may feel about his administration, what he put in place that we all can take advantage of is what's called the blind trust. The blind trust in 1986 was before he became elected president.
Yeah.
Okay. But the design of the blind trust is right in its name, blind. It is to hide and protect business assets. So,
Mm, mm, mm.
what that allows us to do now that we have access to this information is to be able to protect our assets in the way that he was able to protect his. And for
Right.
those who may not be aware, he was able to avoid all types of tax litigations, all types of accusations
Mm,
about taxes and how he handled his money because of this clause right here. The blind trust allows you to hide assets
mm.
in your business. Wouldn't we all love to take advantage of that? Well,
Yes, sir.
the
Wow.
opportunity is here. So a lot of things are starting to make sense now. We've seen these things in place, but it's really starting to provide a real footing or understanding for how we can operate and go forth. And trust me, you'll want to hang around to the end because we're going to talk about how this applies to you and I today. It's wonderful to talk about, as you said earlier, the future, but how's this going to help me right now is what we really want to find out. All right. So please, please, please stay tuned. I want to talk about the five characteristics that makes this trust unique. Okay, we're going to talk about those characteristics. So number one, this registered copyright is based on a combination of these five components that cannot be easily duplicated. Notice we said copyrighted. No one else has this strategy. Okay, so we're going to talk about what it means to be irrevocable. All right, with a living trust, irrevocable means something totally different than it does with a private federal trust. So, traditionally speaking, with a living trust or a statutory trust, state trust, however you're familiar with the term, you have two options with these trusts. and that's going to be either a revocable or an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust does not allow you to have any control within a living trust. Okay? The only way to have control is to have a revocable trust. But the sheer designation from the time you set up the living trust as a revocable trust in order to maintain control of the assets and so forth, that one designation allows attorneys to be able to subpoena and investigate that trust. So you have two options. Either you're going to have control or you're not going to have control
Right.
of your trust if you go with a state-based or a living trust. Now, with these trusts, they're irrevocable, but not meaning that you don't have control. It just means that you cannot change the corpus or the constitution of the trust. You cannot change the arrangements or the agreements inside the trust. Now, with it being irrevocable, you can't change those things, but what can be changed? Well, as you see at the bottom of the screen here, there are three main positions within a private federal trust. Number one is going to be the trustee. The trustee and his assignments or her assignments will be to manage the assets, make investments, and banking decisions. Okay, so that is the trustee. The second position, which is truly the most powerful position, is that of the compliance officer. The compliance officer is the one who adds and removes trustees and beneficiaries. So you have the control as the compliance officer. Now, when we establish these trusts, you maintain those two positions. The trustee who sets up the bank account, who manages the investments, make the decisions, that's you. You can also hold the compliance officer, which means you're the one who can designate beneficiaries and then add or remove assets as you continue to do business throughout your lifetime. So those two positions are going to be the most powerful positions within this trust. Now, that's upon setting it up. Once you have it set up, you can then decide to resign as the trustee, hire an accounting firm to manage the bank account and all of your accounts. You want to stay compliant with the IRS. You want to have an accounting firm handle that. And then you can resign as a trustee. And then as a beneficiary of the account, you can now benefit from what we talked about, all the advantages that come along with these type of trusts. Now, what is in direct conflict is you can't be a beneficiary and be a trustee. In other words, the trustee makes the decisions about the accounts and the money and has access to things. You can't be in that position and be a beneficiary at the same time. So you will initially be the trustee, get the account established. You automatically are the compliance officer. You make all the decisions regarding adding and subtracting of assets and beneficiaries. And then you resign as a trustee. And here you are now as a beneficiary. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can't be double dipping.
Can't be doing that's it. That's double dipping. I mean, yes, sir. That's the best way to explain it.
Yeah.
All right. So then the second thing is the non-grantor. As was explained earlier, I want this to stick with us. Non-grantor means you did not put your social security number up to set up these trusts. You are not going to be a grantor, which means you're going to be the one who uses your social and contributes the assets to the trust. But by using a non-grantor settler, that gives you control and access without your social security number being attached.
Right.
Number
Okay.
three, what makes this trust unique is you have what's called a complex trust with simple provisions. Well, the simple provisions are the part that are irrevocable. You can't change these things. The complex part is what allows you to decide what years you want to claim assets or designate assets, depending on which type of trust we're operating under, as income, or if you're just going to allocate assets to the corpus of the trust. Okay, so we're going to get into all the taxes later. So in other words, you decide, and that's what makes it complex. That's the discretionary authority. You can
Okay.
use discretion to determine how you want things to apply this year, and then next year you may change your mind and do something else. Remember, the structure of the trust does not change. That's irrevocable. But how you handle and designate assets, you have complex authority or discretionary authority to do so.
Right.
Another form of
Okay.
discretion you should know is, again, you get to determine who are beneficiaries of this trust and who are not beneficiaries of this trust. So let's go back to an example we used in our previous discussion. Let's say you were married to someone, and you and your spouse, after years of hard work and contributing assets together, okay, and you are the compliance officer of that trust, right? And all the assets that you all have contributed to this trust. But let's say something happens, the marriage does not work out.
Mhm.
Well, you get to determine now whether or not you want to continue having that person as a beneficiary of this trust, or if they decided to move on, then you allow them to go their separate ways. So for
Mhm.
those that are not yet married, this is the best prenuptial agreement you can find out there. Okay,
Right. Right.
there's no need to discuss assets that were not in your possession; they belong to the trust.
Right.
So someone truly marries you for love. Okay. And that becomes a whole lot more complicated, especially in the event that children are involved and other things. But with discretionary authority, you decide to add
Hmm.
or remove any beneficiaries. I hope this is not too much information. I know this is a lot we
No, no, this is good. I mean, because I mean these are dated. I mean these are real life situations that could come up. Number one. So to that end, let's say you do get married, you do have a trust, but you do end up trying to dissolve. Can that trust become a contentious point in the divorce, or because it's a trust, it can't even be brought up?
it can't even be brought up. It can't
Okay.
even be brought up because you don't own the trust. It's not in your social. So it cannot
Right.
even very good
Okay.
question. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
asked. It can't even be brought up. Your attorneys, your CPAs, they can't be brought up even in court because your name is not attached to this.
Right.
And it is no
Wow.
one's business who's a beneficiary. That's private.
That's private. Yeah. Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. All right. So then,
Okay.
let me see. The last thing is that spendthrift clause, and I'm just going to hint on it just a little bit again. When we talk next week, we're going to go more in depth with that. We're going to talk about your tax brackets. We're going to talk about how to eliminate, or not eliminate, excuse me, mitigate those taxes, right?
Mhm.
Because we can't eliminate taxes, but we can
Right.
mitigate them in such a way that you have zero tax liability. Okay.
One
So
last question before you move on to that.
yes, sir.
As the beneficiary, or as the trustee, and you had said that you can decide when you want to allocate assets out, from the trust, out from the trust to whomever, whatever. Is it at that time that it becomes taxable income, or is it just transferring of funds?
Okay, that's a good question. So let me give you an example. So what you may decide to do instead of taking in income, you may, and take this as an option, decide to purchase another property as part of the corpus instead of that income. And all you did was change forms
Okay.
of assets. So now it's
Okay.
a property. Okay.
Okay.
And so that can, again, help mitigate some taxes, right? Because now you
Right.
have a
Right.
property instead of income.
Right. So best case scenario would be that if you wanted to move some money around or pull some money from the trust, it would be best to do it in a sense where it will benefit the trust, not necessarily benefit you personally.
Well, both, because you're
Okay.
both the compliance officer and you're
Right.
the beneficiary. So you get to switch sides and you put on both thinking caps. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Now, to man, and you're getting up into some good stuff now. So what I'm going to share with you at this point, and this is, I don't have a slide on this as of
Sure.
right now, but I'll go ahead and just mention this. If you decide that you should want a private federal trust with our company, you're
Hmm.
going to get 52 weeks worth of training on how to operate within a trust. Because what we're doing now is we're shifting the way we think, we're shifting the way we operate.
Right.
in order to benefit not just us, but the generations to come. And that
Sure.
is training. In other words,
Right.
you might know how to put the keys in the ignition and turn on the vehicle, and you know where the gas pedal is and the brake. But how
Mhm.
many of you know, and you just don't have to go very far? There's a lot of people that know how to operate a vehicle, but don't know how to operate it in a way that's safe for everybody.
Right. Don't know how to drive. Right.
So
Yeah.
with our trust training is for our clients. Okay, so there's a lot of education that goes forth, obviously, to even make this type of decision. But then once you set these trusts in place, you're going to have another year's worth of learning to do. Okay, and our
Mhm.
trust classes are set up as fun. Now, I just want to let you know, we have quizzes, we have a question and answer, we have dialogue. It is set up to be engaging. So it's not like you're going to just come to class and press play, although you may decide to do something like that and just listen,
Right.
but you actually have interaction and you can get questions answered. Okay.
Okay.
And that's the last thing here is that spendthrift. As I mentioned before, we're going to go into the details of what that spendthrift clause includes, but that spendthrift clause is how you benefit now, because everything you're currently spending money on now becomes a tax deduction for you.
Mm.
That makes all the difference. So whatever you're spending, and I've got some examples, we're going to go into it. I
Right.
Just hold on. All right. So that's all I got for today. I look forward to next week being able to share this information. And if you can't tell, I'm excited because my life has been changed.
Mm.
Right? This has made a huge difference for me, my families. I've always, I'm going to talk to you now, okay,
Yep. Yep. You
and,
good?
and say, I've known since I was young that I was different, but I didn't know why, didn't know how. I just knew I don't think like everyone else. And as
Mm-hmm.
I got older, I started recognizing there are certain things I do not want to keep living over and over in my family and my generations, especially when it comes to how we handle money.
Sure.
And as I said from the beginning, I didn't ask for this, but I thank God He brought it to me because I just started learning about money, insurances, investments, all those things, but now understanding how to pass on generational wealth. And I always knew I was different. Now I know why God brought this to me because not only am I going to use this for my family, but I'm going to help everybody else that I can give this information to. And as you said, I'm borrowing from you. We're going to help family first, and then we'll help cousins later.
That's it. That's it. Because, yeah, and it's really because when you realize and recognize from a historical perspective that we're the ones who built everything that is around us, then it is makes no sense that we don't benefit from what we built.
That's right. That's
And everything foundational in these United States and in some parts of the world was built on the backs of blacks. And so if we understand that, then it is time for us to start reaping the benefit from those who have reaped the benefit of our labor. You know, Mitt Romney and Trump and all of those that set up these trusts
right.
set it up because we were working. I mean, they weren't pushing no buttons. They inherited their money
That's right.
so that they could then do something with the money. But we have not been able to pass down anything outside of blood, sweat, and tears and a good work ethic sometimes because we were never able to benefit from the actual work that we've done.
That's
And so when you look at it from that perspective, we're 400 plus years behind the ball.
That's right.
But the word even says though that the last shall be first and the first shall be
Come
last. And
on.
so
Yeah.
this is our opportunity, and we just have to change, like you said, we have to change our mindset. And again, biblical. Be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind,
Right.
so
Yeah.
that you know what is the good and perfect will of God. And so the perfect will of God is that we be good stewards over what He has given
Yes.
us.
Yes.
If it's a penny, if it's 10,000, it don't matter. Because again, the word says that the woman who gave her last, the 2 pence, is known now more now than everybody who gave thousands upon thousands to the church.
So
We remember the one who had the least because it was the most.
that's right.
And when we understand that our least can become the most, not just for our generation, but for generations to come, then the shifting happens. And once the shifting happens, then we can start thinking kingdom and not thinking fiefdom. Because when we get generations together, then you can start changing the world. And so, as I said in the beginning, I say at the end, this is why I do this, because I'm a connector. I bring people together. It may not benefit me, but it was going to benefit someone down the line. And if they can say, you know what, I wouldn't even thought about this if I didn't watch Financial Matters
Yes.
in 2025, in August 6th, 2025, I was watching this show and it changed my thought process of how I see money. And that is what this is all about. So, man, as always, I appreciate you. Appreciate your knowledge, and also appreciate how you present, because I tell people who are entrepreneurs, you got to have a passion first for what you do, because if you don't, it comes off as just a script. But for you, it's who you are, like you said. You didn't know until you knew. But now that you know what to do. And so that's always the key to everything. So I look forward to next week. We're gonna be here, same bat time, same bat channel. And those, we had some that came in. For those who watch the rebroadcast and catch this and say, man, what is Devin talking about now? This is important. This is just a part of ministry, as me teaching on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. And so, share this, study it. If you have questions, write them down, because you'll get his contact information at the end. So that makes sure you keep coming. So you keep coming, get the information. The last week's is in our library, is already there on Clear Faith Christian Ministry. So go back to look at Financial Matters and some of the other videos on Financial Matters, because we plan on doing this in different facets of financial issues, so that we are well rounded when it comes to our money. So we're talking about this time. Like I said before, we're going to probably bring somebody on, talk about insurance, and really talk about the nuts and bolts of insurance. Not that, well, you better have it before you die. I mean that, but why do we need it? Because again, putting money in something that you ain't gonna see till later may not make sense right now. But if we don't do it now, when it's needed, we won't have it. And as the saying says, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And so, even in the little things, you don't have to buy the $100,000 and the $500,000, policy. Sometimes just start with 10, and then build on that, as long as you got a good provider. So that's what we're going to talk about too. Is everybody that sell insurance ain't insurance selling? If that makes sense, you know. So I vet people. It's like, if you ain't doing right by me, you ain't gonna do right by my people. And so, those who come on understand they have been vetted,
Yes.
and they live by what they teach. And so that's what's important to me. So again, thank you, sir. I appreciate you, and we'll be back next week. Thanks to all those who came through. Thanks to all those who stuck and stayed. But again, it's always going to be in the library. So all you got to do is go back. And if you are not a member of Clear Faith Christian Ministries, why not make that choice today? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and you're in. You are in as a part of the Clear Faith Christian Ministries family. It's real simple. I'm not going to make you go through no new membership class. I ain't going to tell you got to give, $10,000 in order to get into the membership. I ain't that preacher. I just want you to learn how to be better, because if you learn how to be better, you'll do better. All right. So until next time, thank you, sir. Till next time, may God's richest and greatest blessings be yours. Peace.